The ships arrived on a Tuesday morning. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the observation window of the Geneva Space Command Center and watched the sky fill with metal. 12,000 warships, they said. 12,000 vessels from 47 different alien species, all united under one banner. The Galactic Council had come to Earth with their final offer: submit or be pacified. Sarah's reflection stared back at her from the glass. She was 42 years old, a xenodiplomat who had spent 15 years learning alien languages and customs. She had believed in peaceful coexistence. She had believed that understanding could bridge any gap between species. Now those beliefs felt like children's dreams. "They're hailing us again," someone said behind her. She didn't turn around. The message had been the same for 3 days. The council spoke of civilization and progress. They talked about humanity's place in the greater galactic community. They used words like partnership and guidance. But Sarah knew what those words really meant. They meant surrender. They meant giving up every choice, every freedom, every dream that made humanity what it was. Earth's leaders had refused, not because they thought they could win. The military analysts had run the numbers 1,000 times. Earth had maybe 300 warships. The Council had 12,000. Earth's weapons were primitive compared to theirs. The shields, the engines, the firepower, everything the Council had was centuries ahead. But humanity had refused anyway. Sarah had been in the chamber when President Martinez gave the final answer to the Council's ultimatum. The alien ambassador, a tall creature with too many arms and eyes like black glass, had listened without expression. Then it had said something that Sarah would never forget. "Your species chooses extinction over enlightenment. How primitive." The attack began 6 hours later. The Council's warships moved with terrible precision. Earth's orbital defense platforms went first. Sarah watched the feeds as massive energy beams tore through metal and concrete like paper. Stations that had taken decades to build disappeared in flashes of light. The people inside them, engineers, scientists, families, gone in seconds. Then the ships came for Earth itself. They didn't destroy cities outright. That would have been wasteful, the Council later explained. Instead, they used something called dampening fields. Massive waves of energy that shut down every electronic device in a targeted area. Power grids failed. Communications went dark. Vehicles stopped working. Within hours, the major cities of Earth were frozen and helpless. Ground troops landed next. Sarah had seen many alien species before, but never like this. The Crithian soldiers who marched through the streets wore armor that shifted colors to match their surroundings. Their weapons fired beams of condensed plasma that could cut through buildings. They moved through human defenses like water through sand. The military tried to fight back. Brave men and women with guns and tanks and fighter jets that suddenly seemed like toys. Sarah watched footage of a battalion making a last stand in Buenos Aires. They held for 20 minutes before the Council forces simply dropped a suppression field and walked past their unconscious bodies. 72 hours after the first ships arrived, it was over. Commander Vexlar of the Crethian Empire gave the announcement himself. Sarah watched his face on every screen in the detention center where she and thousands of others were being held. He had features that were almost human. 2 eyes, a mouth, a nose, but everything was slightly wrong. Too sharp. Too angular. Too cold. "The pacification of Earth is complete," Vexlar said in perfect English. "The human resistance has ended with minimal casualties. Your species will now be integrated into galactic civilization under the Benevolent Governance Protocol. Minimal casualties." Sarah had seen the numbers. 2.3 billion people dead, from the orbital bombardments, from the infrastructure failures, from the panic and chaos as civilization collapsed in 3 days. 2.3 billion lives erased, and the Council called it minimal. The Benevolent Governance Protocol was anything but benevolent. All human governments were dissolved. The Council set up administrative zones and appointed alien governors to each one. Every weapon on Earth was confiscated and destroyed. Not just military weapons, hunting rifles, kitchen knives, anything that could be used to harm. The Council said it was for humanity's own good. They began cataloging Earth's resources, the minerals, the water, the food production, even the art and culture. Everything was documented and assigned a value. Sarah heard whispers that Earth was being turned into a supply depot for the Council's endless expansion into other parts of the galaxy. The re-education centers opened in the second month. Sarah had been moved to a facility outside Geneva, a converted university campus surrounded by high walls and Crithian guards. The council said it was voluntary. They said humans could choose to learn about their new place in galactic society. But everyone knew what happened to people who refused. They disappeared. One afternoon, Sarah stood in the courtyard during the brief recreation period they were allowed. Above her, council flags flew where human ones had once been. The flag showed the symbol of the Galactic Council, 47 stars arranged in a circle, representing the 47 member species. 48 now, she supposed. Though humanity hadn't been given a star, they'd been given a dot in the center of the circle, a small dark dot that represented Earth's new status, not a member, a subject. She watched a group of Crithian soldiers near the old library building. They were looking at something and laughing. Sarah moved closer, staying quiet, staying unnoticed. She'd learned how to do that in the past months. How to be invisible. The soldiers were standing around a memorial. Before the invasion, the university had placed a beautiful sculpture in that spot, a representation of humanity's first faster-than-light ship, the one that had carried human explorers to Alpha Centauri 40 years ago. It had been a symbol of hope and achievement. One of the Crithian soldiers aimed his weapon at the sculpture. He said something in his own language that made the others laugh harder. Then he fired. The plasma beam hit the sculpture dead center. Metal vaporized. The ship that had represented humanity's dreams melted into slag. The soldiers laughed louder and walked away, leaving the ruined memorial smoking in the courtyard. Something inside Sarah went very cold. She had been angry before. Angry at the invasion, angry at the deaths, angry at the injustice of it all. But this was different. This wasn't hot rage that burned and faded. This was ice. This was something that settled into her bones and stayed there. That night, locked in her cell, Sarah lay awake and thought about mercy. The council had talked about mercy constantly. They'd been merciful by not destroying Earth completely. They'd been merciful by keeping most humans alive. They'd been merciful by offering integration instead of extinction, but they'd killed 2.3 billion people. They'd destroyed humanity's home. They'd laughed at humanity's dreams, and they called it mercy. Sarah closed her eyes and made herself a promise. If she survived this, if humanity survived this, the galaxy would learn what mercy really meant. They would learn what happened when you took everything from a species that had clawed its way up from caves and jungles to touch the stars. They would learn that some wounds never heal. Some insults are never forgotten. Some enemies never forgive. Outside her window, the council's ships patrolled the sky above Earth, and Sarah Chen began to plan. 6 months after the conquest, Commander Vexillar stood in what used to be the United Nations building and reviewed the latest reports. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Earth's integration into the Galactic Council was running smoothly. The humans were adapting to their new reality with acceptable speed. The re-education centers were operating at full capacity. Humans were learning proper galactic languages. They were being taught the correct version of history, the one where the Council brought civilization to primitive species across the galaxy. The old human languages were being phased out. English, Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, all scheduled for extinction within 2 generations. Vexler found it distasteful but necessary. Species needed to forget their primitive past to embrace their future. It had worked on 47 other worlds. It would work here too. Most of the occupation force had already been reassigned. Earth was pacified, quiet. The humans who remained were compliant and broken. Only a small garrison was needed now to maintain order. The bulk of the Council fleet had moved on to new conquests in the Outer Rim. But something in the reports bothered Vexillar. The numbers didn't match. According to the initial census, Earth had approximately 8 billion humans before the invasion. After the pacification, that number dropped to 5.7 billion. The 2.3 billion casualties were accounted for and documented. But now, 6 months later, the population registered at only 4.9 billion. 800 million people were missing. Vexillar's subordinate, a young Crithian officer named Telvik, tried to explain it away. Natural population decline, sir. Disease, starvation, despair. It's common in newly pacified worlds during the adjustment period. 800 million? Vexler's eyes narrowed. In 6 months? The humans are weak, sir, both physically and mentally. Bexler wasn't convinced, but he had other concerns. The Council was pressuring him to increase resource extraction from Earth. The mining operations needed to expand. The food production quotas needed to be met. One missing human here or there, even 800 million of them, didn't matter if the planet was still productive. He filed the report and moved on. In a detention facility in what used to be called Switzerland, Sarah Chen sat across from a council tribunal. 3 aliens, a Crithian, a Vorlex, and something that looked like a floating jellyfish, examined her with clinical detachment. "You are being evaluated for attitude adjustment," the Vorlex said through a translator. Its voice sounded like wind through hollow tubes. "Your instructors report that you are cooperative but distant." Obedient but cold, Sarah said nothing. She'd learned that silence was safer than speech. "Do you accept the Council's authority over Earth?" the Crithian asked. "Yes," Sarah said. The lie came easily now. "Do you believe the integration process is beneficial for humanity?" "Yes." "Do you harbor any resentment toward the Council?" Sarah looked directly at the Crithian. Her face showed nothing. Her voice was calm. "No." The 3 aliens conferred in a language Sarah couldn't understand. Finally, the jellyfish creature spoke. "You are cleared to continue your re-education. You may return to your quarters." Guards escorted Sarah back through the corridors. She walked with her head down, her shoulders slightly slumped. The perfect image of a defeated woman. When the cell door closed behind her, she allowed herself a small smile. Her cellmate, a woman named Maria Rodriguez, sat on the lower bunk. Maria was younger than Sarah, maybe 30, with engineer's hands and sharp eyes. She waited until the guard's footsteps faded before speaking. "How did it go?" "They believe I'm broken," Sarah whispered. Maria nodded. "Good. How long until Exodus fleet is ready?" 3 weeks, Sarah said quietly. "And they'll never see us coming." The conversation ended there. They'd learned to keep communications brief. The cells weren't monitored. The Council was too confident for that. But habits of caution had kept them alive this long. Sarah lay on her bunk and thought about what the Council didn't know. What they couldn't know because their arrogance had made them blind. Before the invasion, humanity had seen it coming. Not the specific date or time, but the inevitability. The Galactic Council had been expanding for centuries, absorbing species after species. First contact with humanity had been friendly, diplomatic. But Sarah and others like her had studied the Council's history. They'd seen the pattern. Integration was never optional. It was just a matter of time, so humanity had prepared. Not for victory, that was impossible against 12,000 warships. But for survival. Deep space installations had been built in secret. Mining colonies hidden in the Oort cloud, far beyond any planet where the Council might look. Research stations tucked into nebulae where sensors couldn't penetrate. Military outposts disguised as asteroids, cold and dark and waiting. And ships, hundreds of ships built in secret shipyards. Not the big obvious warships that Earth's military had used to fight the invasion. Those had been sacrifices, distractions. The real fleet was smaller, faster, built with experimental technology that Earth's best scientists had been developing in the shadows. When the Council's invasion began, a second operation had started in secret. Underground networks smuggled people off Earth. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, doctors, anyone with skills that humanity would need to survive. They moved in small groups, traveling through abandoned tunnels and forgotten bunkers to hidden launch sites. The Council had been watching Earth's spaceports. They hadn't been watching the small cargo ships that lifted off from remote locations in the dead of night. They hadn't noticed the escape pods launched during the chaos of the invasion. They hadn't counted the colony ships that had left Earth's solar system weeks before the Council fleet arrived. 800 million missing people. The Council thought they were dead. They were actually in deep space, building, planning, and preparing for what came next. Sarah had stayed behind deliberately. Someone needed to be on Earth. Someone needed to watch the Council's movements, learn their patterns, understand their weaknesses. Someone needed to be in position when the time came. That someone was her. 3 weeks, Maria had said. 3 weeks until Exodus fleet was ready for its first operation. 3 weeks until the Council learned that conquering Earth had been the biggest mistake in their long history. Sarah closed her eyes and remembered her briefing before she'd let herself be captured. Admiral Okoye, the highest-ranking human military officer still alive, had looked at her with tired eyes. "You understand what we're asking?" Okoye had said. "You'll be in their hands." in their prisons. You'll have no protection. I understand, Sarah had replied. When we're ready, we'll send a signal. That's when you act. Not before. No matter what they do to you, no matter what you see, you wait for the signal. I'll wait. Okoye had gripped her shoulder. They think we're beaten. Let them keep thinking that. Every day they believe their own lies, we get stronger. Now lying in her cell with Maria breathing softly in the bunk above, Sarah thought about strength. Not physical strength. Humans had never been the strongest species. Not technological strength. The Council had centuries of advancement on them. But strategic strength. The ability to plan, to sacrifice, to endure, to remember. The Council had conquered Earth in 3 days. They'd killed billions. They'd thought that was the end of the story. They were wrong. It was only the beginning. The first outpost went dark on a Monday. Council Station Delta 9, a mining facility in the Kepler system, stopped transmitting during a routine check-in. The Council fleet sent a scout ship to investigate. What they found was debris, twisted metal floating in space. No survivors, no bodies, just wreckage and silence. The investigation concluded it was an accident. Mining operations were dangerous. Sometimes things went wrong, then it happened again. Council Outpost Meridian 12 went silent. This time they sent a full battle group to investigate. Same result. Debris. Silence. Nothing else. By the third week, 14 Council installations had vanished across 3 sectors of space. No warnings, no distress signals, just there one moment, gone the next. And always floating in the wreckage, they found the same thing. An audio file, broadcasting on all frequencies. A human child singing a lullaby. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Commander Vexlar watched the emergency council session with growing unease. The 47 member species were arguing, their voices overlapping in a dozen languages. Some wanted to increase military patrols. Others suggested it was pirates or rebels from other conquered worlds. A few even suggested retreating from the affected sectors entirely. We need to review the security footage, Vexlar said, cutting through the noise. The main screen flickered to life. It showed the final minutes of Council Outpost Kepler 7. The station seemed normal. Workers moving through corridors. Ships docked at the loading bay. Then the proximity alarm screamed. Ships appeared from nowhere. Not through normal faster-than-light travel, which left signature energy patterns. These ships just materialized like they'd been hiding in empty space itself. The design was sleek and predatory. Sharp angles. No wasted space. Built for one purpose. War. The station's commander barely had time to shout a warning before the weapons fired. But these weren't normal weapons. The energy beams passed through the station's shields like they didn't exist. Defense turrets tried to respond, but their targeting systems couldn't lock on. The attacking ships moved too fast, shifted too quickly, like they knew what the defenders would do before they did it. In 90 seconds, it was over. The attacking ships disappeared as suddenly as they'd appeared. The station began breaking apart, its hull torn open, its systems dead. The council chamber was silent. Those ships, someone finally said. What species builds like that? Vexlar felt cold. Humans, impossible, another council member protested. We cataloged all their technology. Their ships were primitive. We destroyed their entire fleet. We destroyed the fleet they showed us, Vexlar said quietly. The implications spread through the chamber like poison. If humans had ships like that hidden away somewhere, then everything the council believed about the conquest was wrong. Earth hadn't fallen because humanity was weak. Earth had fallen because they'd let it fall. We need to negotiate, someone suggested. Negotiate? Vexlar shook his head. With whom? We don't even know where these ships are coming from. We have leverage, another council member said. We still control Earth. We have billions of humans under our authority. Bring their leadership forward. Make them call off these attacks. 3 hours later, Sarah Chen was dragged from her cell. She didn't resist. She'd been waiting for this. The guards were rough, their grip on her arms tight enough to bruise. They hauled her through corridors and up staircases, into parts of the facility she'd never seen. Finally, they reached a massive chamber. The Council of 47 was assembled. Representatives from every member species, seated in a semicircle that rose like an amphitheater. In the center, standing alone, was Commander Vexlar. Sarah was thrown to her knees in front of them. Her hands were bound behind her back. Blood ran from a cut above her eye where a guard had struck her. She looked up at the assembled aliens with an expression of weary defiance. "Dr. Sarah Chen," Vexlar said, "former xenodiplomat of Earth. You will speak for your species." "I don't speak for anyone," Sarah said. Her voice was hoarse. "I'm a prisoner." "Your people are attacking Council installations," Vexlar continued. 14 stations destroyed. Thousands dead. You will contact your military and demand they cease these attacks immediately." Sarah said nothing. "We are offering you an opportunity," a Vorlex representative added. "Help us stop this violence and we will show mercy to Earth. Continue this aggression and we will have no choice but to respond with force." Still, Sarah remained silent, head down, breathing slowly. "Speak," Vexlar shouted. "You humans claim to value life. Lives are being lost. End this." Sarah lifted her head. Her eyes met Vexlar's. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but in the acoustics of the chamber, every word carried clearly. "You conquered Earth?" The question hung in the air. Vexlar frowned. "You know we did." Sarah's expression didn't change. "Then let me explain what you've done." She struggled to her feet despite her bound hands. A guard moved to force her back down, but Vexlar waved him off. Sarah stood swaying slightly, fixing her gaze on each council member in turn. "You didn't conquer humanity," she said, still whispering. "You took our home, our birthplace, the world where every human who ever lived was born, where every human who ever died is buried, where our children played in the sun, where our parents rest beneath the soil." Her voice remained soft, almost gentle, but something in her eyes made the council members shift uncomfortably. "And you expected mercy?" The chamber had gone completely silent. "Mercy," Sarah continued, "was a luxury we invented during peacetime. It was a gift we gave to each other when we had enough food, enough space, enough safety to afford being kind. We built it into our laws and our religions and our philosophies. We were proud of it. We thought it made us civilized." She took a step forward. The guards tensed but didn't stop her. "But mercy was never natural to us. Do you know what's natural to humans? Survival, violence, revenge. We spent 200,000 years climbing out of caves and jungles. We spent 200,000 years fighting predators, fighting each other, fighting the very planet we lived on. We survived ice ages and plagues and wars. We survived because we were very, very good at killing anything that threatened us." A smile touched her lips. It was terrible. Empty. The smile of someone who had nothing left to lose. "We got soft for a while. We had a few centuries of peace and plenty. We started to believe we'd evolved past our violent nature. We built the United Nations. We wrote treaties about human rights and warfare conventions. We taught our children that violence was never the answer." The smile faded, replaced by something colder. "But you took our home. You killed 2.3 billion of us. You laughed at our monuments. You erased our history. You tried to make us forget who we were." Sarah's whisper had gotten even quieter, forcing every being in the chamber to strain to hear. "And you reminded us exactly what we are, what we've always been. Survivors. Predators. The species that killed every other human species on Earth until only one remained. The species that looked at the stars and decided we would own them. The species that spent 10,000 years inventing new and better ways to kill." She looked directly at Vexlar. "You asked me to call off the attacks. I can't. Not because I won't, because I can't. Do you know why? Because the humans out there in the dark, they're not looking for your surrender. They're not interested in negotiations or peace treaties or mercy." Her voice dropped to barely audible. "They're teaching you what happens when you take everything from a species like ours. They're showing you that mercy isn't a weakness you can exploit. It's a gift you didn't deserve. And once you destroy it," the smile returned, cold and sharp as a blade, "you discover what we're like without it." In the terrible silence that followed, Sarah Chen stood bloodied but unbowed before the Galactic Council of 47 species, and they finally understood what they had awakened. The Exodus fleet emerged from dark space at exactly 0300 Galactic Standard Time. Admiral Keiko Okoye stood on the bridge of the ESS Remembrance, humanity's first true warship built in exile. Around her, holographic displays showed 23 different council worlds simultaneously. On each one, human ships were appearing from the nothing, their new stealth drives allowing them to bypass every detection system the council possessed. "All units report ready," her tactical officer said. Okoye nodded. Execute Operation Morning. The attacks began. On Crithian Prime, homeworld of Commander Vexlar's species, human fighters screamed down through the atmosphere. They ignored the military bases and the shield generators protecting them. Instead, they targeted communications arrays, power distribution networks, transportation hubs, supply depots. Within an hour, Crithian Prime's capital city went dark. No power, no communications, no way to coordinate their defenses. The planetary defense fleet scrambled to respond, but their command structure had collapsed. Ships received contradictory orders or no orders at all. The human ships danced between them, smaller and faster than anything the Crithians had faced. When the Crithian ships fired their massive plasma cannons, the human vessels were already gone. When they tried to lock targeting sensors, the humans had shifted frequency and disappeared from their screens. It wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. On Vorlex Station, the floating habitat that housed 3 billion of the jellyfish-like Vorlex species, human ships appeared in the docking bays. Marine teams stormed through the corridors in zero gravity, but they didn't kill civilians. They secured the station's vital systems: life support, water purification, food processing, and placed them under lockdown. The Vorlex Council received a message in perfect Vorlex language. You have 72 hours to evacuate your military forces from Earth, or we shut down your life support. We're not bluffing. We learned from the best. Across 23 worlds, the pattern repeated. Human forces struck with precision and overwhelming force, but the targeting was surgical. Infrastructure, military assets, command networks, no civilian casualties, no destruction for destruction's sake. The Council had shown humanity how to conquer a world. Now humanity was showing them how to do it properly. In orbit above Earth, in the former United Nations building, alarms screamed. Vexlar rushed to the command center where his officers were frantically trying to process reports from across Council space. All our major worlds are under attack simultaneously, Telvik reported, his voice shaking. Fleet Command has lost contact with 60% of our naval assets. The humans are jamming everything. How many ships? Vexlar demanded. We don't know, sir. They keep appearing and disappearing. Estimates range from 500 to 5,000. Vexlar pulled up a tactical map. Red icons marked human fleet positions across Council territory. They were everywhere, striking multiple targets at once, coordinating across light years of space with impossible precision. Where did they get this technology? Someone asked. Where did they build these ships? Vexlar understood now. While the Council had been congratulating themselves on conquering Earth, humanity had been out there in the dark spaces between stars, building, planning, waiting. Sir, we're receiving a transmission. It's broadcasting on all frequencies, and show me. The screen filled with faces, human faces, thousands of them. Men, women, children, names and ages appeared beneath each one. A voice spoke over the images. Female, young, calm. These are the people who died when you attacked London. 2,347 souls. We remember their names. We remember their faces. We remember what they dreamed about, what they loved, who they left behind. The faces changed. A new group appeared. These are the people who died when you attacked Beijing. 41,209. We remember all of them. The faces kept changing. Tokyo, New York, Mumbai, Cairo, São Paulo, every city, every person. 2.3 billion faces. You called their deaths minimal casualties. You called it mercy. We call it by its proper name, murder, and we will never forget. The transmission ended. A moment later, reports came in from across Council space. Every military installation, every government building, every ship in the Council fleet had received the same message. The psychological warfare had begun. Admiral Okoye watched the Battle of Crithian Prime unfold from her flagship. Her tactical officer, Commander James Park, highlighted targets on the holographic display. The orbital defense platforms are regrouping, Park said. They're trying to form a defensive perimeter. Let them, Okoye replied. Target the military headquarters. Deploy Tears of Terra. 3 human destroyers broke formation and accelerated toward the planet's surface. As they reached low orbit, their cargo bays opened. Hundreds of metal rods fell toward the surface. Not bombs, not missiles. Just solid tungsten rods, each one weighing several tons. They hit the ground at orbital velocity. The kinetic energy was devastating. The military headquarters complex, 20 square kilometers of bunkers and command centers and weapons depots, simply disappeared. The explosions could be seen from space, but the destruction was confined, precise. The civilian city nearby remained untouched, a message broadcast to the Crithian government. That was a warning. Evacuate your military forces from Earth within 72 hours, or we'll do the same to every military installation on your planet. Your choice. Sarah Chen had escaped during the chaos that followed her speech to the council. The confusion of simultaneous attacks across council space had given her the opening she needed. A maintenance shaft, a stolen access card, a human resistance cell waiting with forged documents. Now she sat in a safe house in the ruins of Geneva, watching reports come in from across the galaxy. On a secure terminal, she accessed the human fleet's tactical network. She'd been the strategic mind behind Operation Morning. Every target, every timing, every psychological element. Years of diplomatic experience had taught her how alien species thought, how they made decisions, what frightened them. She'd used that knowledge to design an offensive that would break the Council's will without destroying their worlds, because Sarah understood something the Council never had. The goal wasn't revenge, it was making sure this never happened again. Maria Rodriguez entered the room with food and water. "You need to rest," she said. "You've been awake for 30 hours. "I'll rest when it's done," Sarah replied, eyes fixed on the screens. The data was clear. The Council was fracturing. Some species wanted immediate peace. Others called for total mobilization. A few were already pulling their forces back to defend their homeworlds. Perfect. Fear and division. That's what broke empires. Sarah pulled up another file. The AI-assisted strategic planning system that humanity had been developing in secret for decades. She'd fed it every piece of data they had on the Council. Their military doctrine, their cultural values, their historical conflicts. The AI had run millions of simulations, wargaming every possible response. The conclusion was always the same. If humanity struck hard enough, fast enough, and smart enough, they could force a surrender within 90 days. Not through superior force, the Council still had more ships, but through superior strategy. Humans had always been good at one thing: learning from their enemies. The Council had shown humanity how to conquer a world, how to occupy territory, how to suppress a population. Now humanity was using those same lessons against them, but better, smarter, more ruthlessly efficient. On the screen, a new report appeared. Council forces were pulling back from Earth. Not all of them. Vexillar still held the planet with a substantial garrison. But the outlying posts were being abandoned. Ships recalled to defend Council worlds. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Phase 1 complete. The Council had lost the strategic initiative. Now came Phase 2, making them understand that they'd never get it back. 3 months into the human counteroffensive, Commander Vexillar stood in the ruins of Council authority and faced the truth. They had lost not in a single decisive battle, not through overwhelming force. The Council still had more ships than humanity, more soldiers, more resources. But none of it mattered because they had lost something more important: the will to fight. The reports told the story. 60% of Council territory was under human control or had declared neutrality. The member species were abandoning each other, retreating to their homeworlds, desperate to protect what remained. The alliance that had held together for centuries was crumbling under the weight of its own fear. And the humans kept coming. Relentless, patient, methodical. They didn't destroy worlds. That would have been easier to fight against. Instead, they dismantled the Council piece by piece, cut off supply lines, disabled shipyards, seized communication hubs. The Council's civilization wasn't being destroyed, it was being surgically paralyzed. The economic collapse had already begun. Trade routes were unusable. Colonies couldn't get supplies. Worlds that had depended on Council infrastructure for everything from food to medicine were sliding toward chaos. And still, not a single civilian casualty reported. Every human attack was precise, targeted, professional. It was humiliating. The Council had killed billions. The humans had killed only soldiers and destroyed only military assets. They were proving day after day that the Council's methods had been excessive, barbaric, unnecessary. The emergency peace delegation reached out on day 90. Humanity agreed to meet on Earth in Geneva, in the same room where the Council had issued their original ultimatum. Vexillar led the Council delegation because no one else wanted to face the humans. He brought representatives from the 12 species that still remained in the Alliance. The others had already withdrawn, declaring private peace treaties or simply fleeing to the Outer Rim. They landed in Geneva in a light transport with no weapons, no guards, no protection. The human resistance forces surrounded them but didn't threaten them. Professional, courteous, cold. The room was exactly as Vexillar remembered it. The same table, the same chairs. But now Council flags lay in a pile in the corner, discarded and forgotten. Human flags, the old Earth flags that the Council had banned, hung on the walls. Sarah Chen sat at the head of the table. She wore black, simple, severe. Behind her stood Admiral Okoye and a dozen other humans, military officers, government officials, scientists, representatives of a species that had refused to die. Speaker Chen, Vexillar began. The title felt strange. The humans had given her a new designation, Speaker for the Dead of Terra, a reminder of what the Council had done. A weight she carried in every negotiation. Commander, Sarah replied. Her voice was neutral, professional, the same voice she'd used years ago as a diplomat, before the conquest, before everything changed. We come to negotiate peace, Vexillar said. The Council is prepared to offer significant concessions. Full reparations for the damages caused during pacification, territory in the Outer Rim for human colonization, a seat on the Council with full voting rights, complete autonomy for Earth and all human worlds. Sarah listened without expression. We are prepared to acknowledge that our methods were excessive, Vexillar continued. We acted without full understanding of human culture and values. We seek to repair the relationship between our peoples. You're offering us everything we would have accepted before the invasion, Sarah said quietly. Autonomy, respect, partnership, all the things we asked for before you decided conquest was easier than conversation. Yes, Vexillar said. We were wrong. We acknowledge this. Sarah leaned back in her chair. Around the table, the other Council representatives shifted nervously. They knew they had no leverage. No cards left to play. The humans could dictate any terms they wanted. Let me tell you what humanity wants, Sarah said. Not what we wanted before. What we want now, after you took everything from us. She stood and walked to the window. Geneva stretched below, scarred by war but slowly rebuilding. Human flags flew over every building. Complete demilitarization of all Council species for 100 years. Every warship, every weapon, every soldier gone, the Council representatives gasped. Vexillar felt his blood run cold. That would leave us defenseless, a Vorlex delegate protested. Yes, Sarah said simply. It will. You're asking us to trust you with our safety, Vexillar said. To believe humanity will protect us? No, Sarah turned to face them. I'm not asking. I'm telling you this is the price. You wanted to integrate us into your civilization? Congratulations. We're integrating you into ours. Under our terms, Admiral Okoye stepped forward. Humanity will assume control of all galactic peacekeeping operations. We will maintain order. We will protect Council worlds from external threats. We will ensure trade routes remain open and colonies remain supplied. But we will do it our way, with our rules, our standards. Second term, Sarah continued. Every Council species will establish a monument on their homeworld, dedicated to the 2.3 billion. Every name, every face, every person who died when you invaded Earth. Your children will visit these monuments. They will learn these names. They will understand what their ancestors did. The jellyfish-like Vorlex representative made a sound like wind through broken glass. Grief or protest, Vexillar couldn't tell. Third term, Sarah's voice remained steady, clinical. You will establish an annual Remembrance Day across all Council worlds, a day of silence and reflection, a day to think about what happens when a civilization mistakes power for righteousness. And finally, Sarah returned to her seat. The word mercy will be removed from all official Council languages. In every document, every treaty, every law, it will be replaced with the human term. A constant reminder that mercy isn't something you can take for granted. It's something you have to earn. The room was silent. The Council representatives looked at each other, horror and despair on their faces. These terms are extreme, Vexlar said finally. They reduce the council to puppet states under human control. Yes, Sarah agreed. That's exactly what they do. We're teaching you what you taught us. The difference is we're not killing billions to do it. And if we refuse, Sarah's expression didn't change. Then we continue the offensive until you don't have the capacity to refuse. Your choice. Peace under our terms or war until you have nothing left. Vexlar looked at her for a long moment. The woman who had once believed in peaceful coexistence. The diplomat who had spent years learning alien languages and customs. The council had destroyed that person and created something else. Something harder, colder, more dangerous. How long until humanity shows mercy again? Vexlar asked quietly. Sarah's answer was immediate. When we forget what you did to us. Pray to your gods that day never comes. The council signed the treaty 3 days later. 10 years passed. Sarah Chen stood on a hill outside Geneva and watched children play in the park below. Human children, laughing, running, growing up in a world that was healing. The treaty had held. The council species, stripped of their military might, had discovered something unexpected. Peace. Real peace enforced by human fleets that patrolled the galaxy with ruthless efficiency. Trade flourished. Science advanced. Culture bloomed. The council worlds thrived economically and technologically, freed from the massive military expenditures that had drained their resources for centuries. But they thrived under human eyes. Human rules. Human authority. A young Crithian approached hesitantly. Vexlar's daughter Sarah had learned. Now a diplomat herself. Part of the new generation trying to rebuild bridges between species. Speaker Chen, the young Crithian said. Her English was perfect, respectful. May I speak with you? Of course. I visited the memorial on Crithian Prime, the one for the 2.3 billion. I read the names, saw the faces. The young Crithian's voice trembled. I can't comprehend what my people did. What my father authorized. Sarah said nothing. She'd heard variations of this conversation many times over the years. Will humanity ever forgive the council? The young Crithian asked. Will there ever be true peace between us? Sarah considered the question. Forgiveness? Perhaps in time. Centuries from now, maybe longer, when the scars fade and the memories blur. And forgetting? Never. Sarah's voice was firm. We will never forget. That's not cruelty. That's survival. We learned that from you. The young Crithian nodded slowly. I understand. Thank you for your honesty. As the Crithian diplomat walked away, Sarah returned her attention to the children in the park. A human girl chased a Vorlex child in some game that involved much giggling. A young Crithian sat with human teenagers sharing food and stories. This was humanity's victory, not conquest, not revenge, but ensuring that no species would ever again mistake kindness for weakness. That mercy would be recognized as the precious gift it was, not a vulnerability to exploit. The galaxy was at peace. A terrified, respectful peace enforced by the species that had learned the hardest lesson of all. That survival sometimes required becoming what you once fought against. Above Earth, human warships stood eternal vigil, silent guardians born from ashes, protectors forged in the fires of conquest. Humanity had not asked for this role. They had not wanted it, but the council had given them no choice.